Welcome everyone to this holographic podcast or HoloCast. And today we have a very, very special guest, Mr. Checo Muñiz. And today we are recording on Veterans Day. So Checo, thank you so much for your service.
I appreciate that, Fernando.
Checo, he also is the president and CEO of CYFOR Technologies, a company that provides cybersecurity services to NASA and also to the Department of Defense. Checo, welcome to this HoloCast, and please let us know a little bit about who's Checo Muñiz. Let us know about your company and your services.
Well, thanks, Fernando. It's a real honor to be here on this podcast, and I look forward to sharing some thoughts with you and the audience. So basically, CYFOR Technologies were founded about 10 years ago. And we started out looking at a couple of markets, primarily in the aerospace and the DoD sector. And one of the areas, in addition to engineering and some of the other ones, is the cyber realm, which we'll be talking about. So going back to my military roots, I started working this back in the 90s. And who would have thought that, that little start in cybersecurity back in my active duty days would blossom to what it is today. So that's one of the main areas that we focus on in this company, is cybersecurity, and all the nuances that I hope to share with the audience that I think will hopefully give some better insights and some of the fascinating aspects of cybersecurity and the cyber world and all the things that it entails.
Well, that's very good. Cybersecurity, that's a tough and interesting word. Let me know what's cybersecurity for the people that has no idea, because for some people, cybersecurity is just like having an antivirus or a password, and it's more than that.
Well, that's a great question, Fernando, and you included an important metaphor that I'd like to hook onto. You said viruses. So viruses in the cyber world has some analogies in the real world in terms of what it does to humans. And cyber and cybersecurity in many ways is very similar. Cyber, and something I'm very passionate about and I really like to share with people, it is a lot of technology, but cyber in and of itself and the information aspects, the information dominance, all the tools and benefits that all the risks that come with it, is really a human-intensive endeavor. In my opinion, what really hinges and is really important about cyber is the human aspect. Technology will change, it will evolve, but the cyber aspects and what it means to us is really hinges on the human psyche, what we use, what we perceive it for, what motivates people to operate in the cyber world, the use of technology, the benefits, the risks, and all the different aspects that really link it to what people do, how they think, how they operate. So I hopefully can hook for some people to think about it a little bit differently, not so much the technology, that's important, but what it means to us as individuals, as companies, as nation states, as conglomerates, and really try and make people aware of why it's so important. And I think when you do that, it really helps orient your thinking about where do I fit in this big, giant puzzle that we call cyber and cybersecurity. So hopefully I'll be able to elaborate and help people kind of figure out why it's important and then where do they sit in this ecosystem that's incredibly complex.
Well, that's fascinating. So human factor is like, are we the weakest link in the chain? Is more like a factor of risk, the human factor? Please let me know about that.
So Fernando, you asked me about the human factors aspect. I'm very passionate about that. I believe that at the heart of it, at the end of it, the human element is really central and the most important part of the whole cyber world and pieces of it like cybersecurity. Because you have technology, but technology is really simply enabling the human mind to pursue whatever it is you're going to do, whether it's an attack, a defense against an attack. And then more importantly, we tie it back to what I talked about earlier in terms of strategy. You understand what their motivations are, where they're going to go, because there's too many things to defend against. And you don't know what they're doing, you don't know what kind of 0 days they're going to come after you with. So if you have an idea of what their motivation is, what their notional strategies are, then you can kind of organize what it is you're going to do to defend yourself, to figure out what you're going to do. And you can be all the way from a big corporation to a nation state to an individual just at home figuring out, okay, you know, what is a typical bad guy going to do? Well, they're going to try and, hack my phone. Well, just do good hygiene, or at a corporate level, what are your most important things you need to defend? So now the problem becomes a lot more understandable, and you're able to kind of make sense of where you fit into it. Because that's the big thing, because it's very confusing, especially for folks that aren't intimately in the game, is what is this mystery of cybersecurity. So that helps kind of orient you in terms of where you fit.
That's amazing. So essentially, it's an evolution of crime. So people used to have always a motivation. So it's not computers attacking computers, are guys trying to get into your information using new tools. And the way that I see it is like, I'm interested to have access to the information of this contractor, to have access to the government, for instance, and just leave a USB memory, a thumb drive in the parking lot to see this guy just connected to the computer, or trying to go more than that and say, okay, this guy, he may have an Alexa device, or he may have, his kids may have an Xbox, or they are traveling all the family together, and then when they go to the hotel, they use a guest network, and then finally I just create a fake network and they are connected and I can have access to the devices and I'm in. So that's kind of the risk, and we can see like trying to find the weakest spot in the individual to have access to a corporation. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good example. Sometimes you need to identify for a company perspective, what is it that's most valuable? What are bad people want to do to steal that you have a value? And a lot of times it's not necessarily a product. And this is where I talk to a lot of my colleagues in the small business world, and they say, well, what do I care if somebody hacks my networks? I got nothing to steal. Well, maybe an access point, and especially if you're involved in government contracting, or if you've got contracts to other businesses that do have valuable information. A lot of time you're nothing more than a very valuable, trusted connection into that network. So that's where the orientation helps in terms of where you fit. The other thing and it scales all the way to someone that's listening to this that's just saying, hey, I'm just at home, or I just got my cell phone. What do you have that's valuable? Your banking account, the things you put on your iPhone to alert you to spams or potential threats. So you use technology, but at the end it's a human mind that kind of figures out, what do I need to do for that technology?
So should I train also my family, because they could be the weakest link at home? Like maybe I got all the cybersecurity training, and I can say like, hey, I have firewalls and I have a VPN when I'm using the internet, and I don't connect anything to my computer, and I have BitLocker. But when I'm traveling, maybe my family or at home, they can keep a port open using a game console, and the hacker can get inside. And if they are inside a network, it's going to be easier for them to navigate, right? Is that a recommendation? Like maybe also train your family and friends?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you make it relevant to whoever you're talking to. So if you're talking to your teenager, or a younger person, or your spouse, you simply say, hey, here's some things we can do to protect us against what we know could be some bad stuff. So if you have an Xbox, and we know that there are some bad people that try and hack into those things and turn on cameras or whatever, it could be nothing more than putting a cover over the lens. It could be when you're not using your monitors, baby monitors, just unplug them or whatever. It doesn't have to be an elaborate, sophisticated thing. It's just reasonable things that you can do to protect yourself, which is another thing I tell people, especially businesses. You're never going to get a 100% solution. That's not technically viable or cost effective. What you want to do is mitigate risks. And you say, well, what are my most important things that I need to invest my resources in? At home, it could be, hey, I want to protect my kids against somebody interloping and turning on cameras or listening to my baby mom or whatever. And then there's very simple technologies to do that. At a bigger scale, and you're a company and saying, hey, these are my most important things, those are the ones you really defend against. And it could be something as simple as, I have backups for everything. So if I get some malware that encrypts my hard drive and ransomware kinds of things, I have a way to recover. So you always kind of scale your response and don't feel you have to solve everything. You just need to take reasonable steps, and then the problem becomes a lot more understandable. And that's always been the case, not the 100%, but maybe the 70%, maybe the 80%, and because you're not going to keep them out all the time, but you have the way to mitigate the risk and recover.
So that's amazing. Essentially, I need to keep my stuff safe, my family, and what I'm learning is like a criminal, they don't strike right away. Some do, but they can be monitoring your stuff, having access to your stuff, learning patterns, and just wait months. I heard from a guy from a financial industry that one of his colleagues, he received an email from a customer with very specific information, because this customer had a trip, an international trip, and it was an important account. He said, hey, remember I'm traveling to this location in Africa, but meanwhile I was on my flight, and we discussed this yesterday. I forgot to complete this transfer. Please, can you do it for me? And everything matches, because the criminal collected information for 6 months, learned about the patterns of the customer, critical information, passwords, everything. So at the time that the criminal just wanted to trigger it, he had all the information, and the customer was flying overseas. So that criminal mind just monitored everything for months. Mm-hmm. So is that true? Like, criminals may not strike right away, and you may not be aware of that, right?
They're the most dangerous. They're the most dangerous. The most obvious ones are fairly easy to deal with. They're overt. You know something happens. You get an alert on your antivirus or whatever. The dangerous ones and typically the most sophisticated ones, the last thing they want to do is be detected. They want to have persistence on your networks. They want to figure out what you have that's valuable. They want to use you to infiltrate as far as they can and data mine. They have no interest in crashing or destroying your networks. They simply want the information. And those are very, very hard to detect. And they tend to be the more sophisticated threats. And you're right. There are plenty of cases that have been talked about in the news where an adversary's gone in there and gained access, the OPM data breach, where millions of records were exfiltrated, and it's a very sophisticated attack, and they are very quiet and good about it. I was involved, to give you an example, on how the thinking, maneuvering mind that I talked about earlier, why it's so important. We had an operation going on, and we were brought in to help kick out a pretty sophisticated adversary. They were so pervasive on the network and controlled so much of the levers that as we were fixing things, they were 10 minutes later unfixing things. And so then you can see that the problem that you talk about, where they've permeated very quietly to gain control and have secondary and tertiary access points to re-enter a target that they have very high interest in.
So, if I'm the owner of a company, what should I do?
Well, what I would say is, going back to What is it you have that's valuable? Do the basics like data recovery, data backups. I would say if you have a process to back up your data, have it segregated so it's not connected to your networks, but it's backed up in a cloud environment, which I would recommend, US-based cloud environment, and have backups, that will alleviate a lot of the majority of threats that a lot of companies have to face, especially from ransomware, where they crash your network or they threaten to crash your network, and you have the ability to reconstitute, whether that's by an attack or a natural disaster for that matter. So, and then the other thing is have a plan to say when something disastrous hits. When Monday morning comes and you do the corporate staff meeting, what's step 1, 2, and 3? So have a incident response plan is pretty basic stuff that walks you through, the first 10 or 12 steps that you have to do to recover. And then other things that a lot of companies are doing now, like cybersecurity insurance, if you have, because a lot of these things can have liability attached to them, loss of proprietary data, or someone launches an attack from your network, and all those kinds of things. So those are things you need to kind of walk through, have a response plan on how you do that, and that will help you orient yourself to get your feet back on the ground.
And what should I do as an individual, a regular person with a family that loves to travel? What should I do as a person?
Yeah, I think a lot of folks are getting fairly smart on the basics, and it doesn't have to be elaborate. It could be as simple as make sure all your patches are in there. When your OSs come out, get to the latest OS, get to the latest patches. That because you have a whole army of very smart people whose only job is to help the consumer be protected against all kinds of intrusion and attacks. That's what patches are, is they help shore up bugs and problems, but also things that are vulnerabilities and all that. So that would be one simple thing I would say. The other basics is put some firewalls. Those are consumer things. Make sure you got your antivirus, and that for the consumer I think would alleviate a lot of the things. And then be smart on some of the human aspect, right? The phishing emails, and now what we have smishing, where they have SMS texting with this is the whatever organization, we couldn't deliver your package, click this link, just to be a little savvy on some of the tricks these people try and play.
Well, that's very true, and that can happen at any time. I heard of people just going to a Starbucks or a hotel and say, yeah, I was connected to the Starbucks network or the Marriott network, and they say, yeah. It was one guy with a router giving you access to the internet and just change one small character. So for you, it was the hotel network or the Starbucks network, but it was just a criminal trying to give you free access in exchange of having all your information. So it's like, and all of us, we can do that. I receive emails like, hey, can you please transfer me my payroll to this account? I was like, no, and actually I don't manage payroll, but it was like, it's just a simple attack. Or now I heard something that I want to talk with you. There's technology that allow you to capture the voice of anyone and play it in real time. And that technology is, I will not give the name because I don't want to give ideas, but that technology is open, it's free, and a lot of criminals are using this just to say, hey, voice verification, this is Checo Muñiz, and as I told you before, please transfer this money to this place, and the voice will match with your voice. How can we protect against that? It's like more factor authentication. What do you recommend?
Yeah, the first thing is just, does it make sense? And like for example, your bank has never ever sent you a text saying, I need you to log in to verify your credentials. I mean, things like that. Or you've never gotten an email from the Postal Service that says, we couldn't deliver, so just simple things like that, that make you take pause. Think about anything before you click a link. That's one of the primary attack vectors now. We've had some instances where they look at your organization and pretending to be HR, and they get an email saying they're me, and they want them to take certain action, and there's been public accounts, and it's easier than what we think. So what I would say to most people, especially consumers, pause and think, and does it make sense? And especially if it's something urgent, that's the big red flag. You're going to get some kind of horrific thing's going to happen to you if you don't click this link. That's usually the obvious thing. So there's things like that people can just use a little common sense. And what I would say is think about vigilance. Don't be paranoid. Don't go around all scared. Just be vigilant. Does it make sense? And just use common sense.
I have a dumb question, which is one of the comments, and especially if you go to the bank. The other day I spoke with a teller, and she said, "Yeah, send me everything using a fax machine." I was like, "A fax machine? Let me see if I can find one. Why a fax instead of an email?" And she said, "Well, try to hack a fax machine." And I was like, "Yeah, that makes sense. Is that true that those fax machines are more secure to send data versus an email?"
Well, technically speaking, they can be exploited as well. It's just harder. And it's like anything else. Criminals always go to what there's a lot of targets on and what's easy. And so it's probably a little safer simply because no one's using them. And so no one's using them, so most of the bad guys really have no interest in that. They go for the things that are accessible and that a lot of people are doing. And everyone's in, all the malware is focused on other things. They're not focused on fax machines. But no, technically they are exploitable, but you have some challenges. You need to get into a phone system, and the phone companies have their own defenses that are pretty good. So I would say, yes, it could be more secure, but not totally.
Now, this technology of podcasts using holograms, people will maybe be watching this tomorrow, but also they may be watching this 20, 30 years from now. Do you have a message to future generations about your role in cybersecurity? Something that you want to tell them, like, now in 2023, we were here. What do you say to these future generations?
I will say information is really the key. I think for the future we'll realize the importance of information and why technology has taken off so much. Because really, if you think about it, whether it's AI or whether whatever devices we have, it's all about accessing information, using it more effectively, and being able to improve our lives and do whatever it is we need to do. So what I would say is we hope we develop good technologies for you to use, and we hope we were good stewards of being safe with that technology and use it for good and try and mitigate the bad stuff. And on that venue, just one last thing I'd like to say is things like artificial intelligence. A lot of these things are double-edged swords. It's like anything else. You have a knife, you can use it for cooking, you can use it for all kinds of creating art, carvings, whatever. You can also use it for very dastardly things. And so cyber and information is going to be like that. So looking to the future generations is, I would say, I hope we were good stewards of that. I hope we were good stewards of keeping artificial intelligence in the proper context with the right protections and the right controls, and make sure it's used correctly. And just to share my passion on that is artificial intelligence has the ability to do amazing things, whether it's making people's faces do certain things or say certain things to a very high degree of fidelity, or data mining, all kinds of things, and it can be programmed. You know, you put in a GPT chat and you ask it a question, it gives you an answer. Down the road, I hope we were good stewards of where we have artificial intelligence telling us what the news is, telling us what the probability of certain things happening, telling us the probability of war or of economic downturns. You know, those things can be skewed and be used not only for giving good information, but be used for misinformation or a lot more nefarious things. And the AI can be so convincing that it may get to a point where we, since it controls so much, we have no way of gauging if it's true or not. So, I mean, those are some scenarios that I hope for the future, 20, 30 years from now, that we're good stewards of that in terms of the safeguards, and really use all this wonderful stuff in the cyber world properly, and that we're good stewards of developing it the right way.
Well, thank you so much, Checo. It was a huge honor to have you here, not only today, also in the future. And don't forget to watch us again next week. Every week we'll have a new episode, and thanks for watching.